Welcome, Swagatham, Vanakkam, Jai Hind. What does it mean to cultivate a scientific temper of mind? As all of us know, the Constitution of India prescribes or lays it down that it is the duty of every citizen to develop a scientific temper of mind. We all accept it in theory, but I wonder how many of us have really bothered to find out what this scientific temper of mind actually means. Obviously, we cannot practice what we do not know or what we are vague about or what we are mistaken about. And therefore, those of us who take the idea of India adumbrated in the Constitution of India seriously would make an effort, howsoever feeble, to understand some of the concepts, the basic concepts, which constitute the architecture of the Indian Constitution. In Article 51A, the duties of a citizen are prescribed. And today we are going to look at just one of that. That is to say, the duty to cultivate critical thinking and a scientific temper of mind. I will not say anything about critical thinking. I'll only focus on the scientific temper of mind. First of all, let's clear a very widespread misconception about this. The word science immediately makes people think about laboratories, about theories, about those distant, esoteric scientists who live in their ivory towers, scientists who speak in their own lingo, all the rest of it. What most people don't realize and what needs to be realized that the scientific temper of mind is very different from the practice of particular branches of science like chemistry, biochemistry, physics, astrophysics, whatever, medicine, engineering, also wherever science is involved. You don't need a degree, much less a PhD in science, to have a scientific temper of mind. And there is no guarantee that because you are a fairly distinguished scientist or a good student of science, that you have a scientific temper of mind. What, therefore, scientific temper of mind actually means can perhaps be understood if you look at Gandhi. This might sound very strange to you, but this is true. For example, not many people notice or pay any heed to the fact that Gandhi chose the title of his autobiography very carefully. And what is the title? The Story of My Experiments with Truth. It's a very strange title for an autobiography. Story is fine, but experiments, and experiments with what? With truth. As far as I can understand, these are the two important landmarks or identification marks or two most distinguished characteristics of the scientific temper of mind. And you would certainly ask me, how can there be scientific temper of mind as far as religion is concerned? Because after all, Gandhi's autobiography is all about his spiritual life. Well, not entirely about his spiritual life, but this spiritual life is the overall framework within which he puts together everything and evaluates everything. So, is there a meeting point between science and religion? Well, perhaps we'll have answers to all these questions as we go along. So, the word experiment clearly, and there can be no debate on this, the word experiment clearly belongs to the domain of science. Though, of course, in common parlance, we say, well, we'll experiment with everything and then decide which is the better option of all the options available. Experiment, try it out. Experiment. Now, the point to be clear about is what is the purpose of experimentation? Clearly, We experiment in order to arrive at the clearest and most precise understanding of what we are to deal with or what we are dealing with. If you are indifferent to the very precise, correct meaning or significance of what we are doing, we'll never experiment. We'll be indifferent. We just go about doing that thing in an attitude of indifference, or as is often said in the Indian context, the sab chalta hai attitude. It's okay, do it in any which way you want. What difference does it make? But a person imbued with a scientific temper of mind will not be satisfied with doing something in any casual fashion or in any given way, in a stereotypical way. He will always try to perfect the way of doing things. So, Gandhi understood not religion but spirituality to be a domain of precision and purity. Whatever you understand about spiritual life must be understood very precisely and purely. And as far as understanding is concerned, impurity is vagueness, or vagueness is impurity. Why? Because vagueness interferes very seriously with your living it or doing anything about it or anything with it. Like, for example, if impurity is beyond a certain level, exist in your bloodstream, that will seriously undermine your efficiency in doing anything. And if that impurity reaches your brain, then it will also undermine your ability to cognize or perceive and understand things. So, purity and impurity must be understood not in ceremonial, ritualistic, or religious terms, but in the scientific way. Purity is a precondition for effectiveness in living and doing. This is extremely important to understand this. I've been in the domain of higher education, so I can tell you that as far as learning is concerned, you may be a school student, a kindergarten student, a high school student, a college student, or whatever, all along. One of the basic strengths of a good student is the keenness to keep his inner life pure. It's a major pedagogic problem today, educational problem today, that because of the excessive exposure of our young people to all kinds of material available readily on the internet, their inner purity is seriously compromised, as a result of which their capacity to concentrate and to have patience with the process of learning, the willingness to struggle with difficult areas of knowledge, all these things are compromised. Though the children of this generation are astoundingly talented, the net achievement that we might expect from them would not be all that great. It will not be commensurate with the promise that they embody. Whereas in olden days, I'm not romanticizing the past. In olden days, there was much less distraction. Therefore, greater chance that those who are interested would concentrate, and their concentration would be sustained over a period of time. Now, today, what we have done is we have made a virtue of this debility, virtue of this weakness. People say, "Oh, don't test anybody's patience." I get this counsel every now and then, and people advise me not to prolong my videos because I would be taxing the very limited patience of my viewers, and they would, in resentment, anger, and frustration, run away from me. I don't buy that argument. I know that that's a ground reality, but I also understand, and I would plead with all of you to understand, that this impatience or lack of mental stamina that we today claim to be the norm is not the norm, it's an aberration. And that aberration is a result of losing or compromising our inner purity. Impurity necessarily breeds restlessness. Rather than recognize that as a symptom of a disease, a sign of our disability, we somehow socially and culturally rationalize it and make it the norm, the new normal, as it were. Let's leave it for the time being, though much remains to be said on this. So, the idea that we need to preserve our inner life clean, pure, almost like radiating light, is an aspect of the mental discipline which, according to Mahatma Gandhi, is so important to preserve. And Mahatma Gandhi, of course, included in this formula, or this way of understanding human life, not only the mind and the soul, but also the body. He fasted in order to keep the body also, besides the mind and the soul, the body also in purity. Gandhi is, of course, considered a health freak. He was very particular about how he kept his body, and he maintained robust health. Up until the time he was shot, he was a picture of health, though a frail, seemingly frail body. His health was superb because he believed that the body, not less than the mind and the soul, needs to exist in purity. So, what I'm saying is the reason why Gandhi used the word experiment in the title for his autobiography is that he had a scientific approach to spirituality. And one aspect of that scientific approach is a relentless pursuit after precision, clarity, not allowing any area of vagueness or uncertainty or incomprehension or ignorance to remain. That's the idea of experimentation. You go on experimenting, and with each stage of progress that you register in this process of experimentation, you are progressing from a lower degree of clarity in understanding the particular phenomenon or problem that you are experimenting on to a higher, and then to a higher, and to a higher level, at the end of which you will attain that degree of enlightenment. You will emit light. That light becomes universal truth, which is then cherished by humankind as a whole. I hope I'm communicating what's an important idea. So, please understand that one of the major points of contrast between religion and spirituality is that religion exists in the twilight zone of partial comprehension, very often of incomprehension, whereas spirituality is a domain of precision in understanding whatever is involved. In the spiritual discipline, you don't accept anything which is not clearly understood, which then becomes the basis for conviction, and it breeds faith of the enlightened kind. So that's the idea of experimentation. Now, is that experimentation relevant to other fields of life? For example, art. Is art scientific? Art has to be scientific. If you look at the great artists, they were also very scientific in the practicing of their art. For example, it may not be very obvious when you see a portrait. If somebody is drawing the portrait of, for example, Jesus Christ, let's take a random example. A great artist will study for years together, study physiognomy, that is the science of understanding a person on the basis of features, so facial physiognomy. There's a certain understanding, for example, that a person with thick set jaws will be a person who is power crazy. So on and so, all kinds of notions. Or a person with serene eyes will be compassionate. A person with broad forehead is intellectual. A person with a very prominent ear um, could be wise as well as sharp. So on and so, all kinds of standardizations or typifications are there. So a great artist who wants to do justice to that particular person he is drawing a portrait of will study for months and years together to arrive at the clearest, finest, most perfected mental picture of that person, and will begin to draw that person the picture of that person only after attaining the highest possible degree of precision in understanding. That's a scientific temper of mind. Now, what is the, how does this idea apply to the scientific temper of mind as far as citizenship is concerned? That's our next question. Well, the point is this: the scientific temper of mind, though the Constitution doesn't say this is how I understand the whole situation in its broad concept. The scientific temper of mind and the critical thinking are all connected to the national motto Satyameva Jayade. We say that truth will triumph. But does truth triumph just like that, irrespective of who we are? Do you think truth will triumph automatically in a nation of idiots or people of no understanding or people who remain in the twilight zone of blurred notions? No. Truth will triumph only when a people as a whole, or the predominant sections of a people, a majority of the people in a society, seek after truth. And what is seeking after truth? Experimentation. What's the aim in seeking after truth? To attain greater clarity, greater clarity, greater clarity about the truth of what we are considering. For example, what is development? There'll be all kinds of notions. We have our methods of measuring growth and development, the metrics of development. To what extent are these metrics appropriate, useful, life friendly in the long term? We're not clear about it at all. In fact, today, the real problem that India faces is our understanding of development. We think that development is material development and that we can somehow bypass the more challenging area of human development. History tells us very clearly that developing material circumstances to the neglect of the duty to develop the human potential or human development is actually a very dangerous undertaking. That's a subject in itself, but let that be. So, if you have a scientific temper of mind, you will certainly engage yourself with the question: what should development mean in the Indian context? What is development as it is generally understood? And you will try to understand it as precisely as you can, but you will not be satisfied with that. You will then ask the second question: what should this development mean in the Indian context? Because the Indian context is unique to India. We can't be developing like everybody else in every other part of the world. So you actually seek the next stage of clarity and purity in understanding. That's a scientific temper of mind. Now, the exact opposite of that is indiscriminately swallowing up every opinion that comes your way. Because in that case, you don't have to apply your mind. All you have to do is to keep your ears open. People will generate all kinds of opinions, and you simply lap them up. And you say, well, that's the ultimate truth. That is where you prove that you're far, far away from this constitutionally mandated state of cultivating the scientific temper of mind. So the scientific temper of mind ultimately connects to truth. Therefore, when the Constitution urges citizens to develop a scientific temper of mind, it also is encouraging us to stay unwaveringly committed to truth. Truth. But today, and I'm saying this based on solid experience pertaining to this very YouTube channel, if you like, or YouTube fellowship, when I try to speak the truth about certain things, certain political situations in this country, I'm threatened. Even to the extent of threatening my life. Count your days. No one bothers to tell me how and where exactly I go wrong. Nobody tells me. But you are not supposed to think or say anything other than what we allow you to. So that is the reality today. And this is exactly the opposite of cultivating the scientific temper of mind. So merely being acquainted with certain words and phrases in the Constitution is not enough. We have to attain clarity in understanding what these prescriptions actually mean. And this video is merely meant as a tentative suggestion that we wake up from our state of indifference and commit ourselves to attaining clarity on the basic concepts that constitute the uh, the basic architecture of the Indian Constitution. Thank you. All the very best.